The moment I saw our childhood home, my eyes felt like galaxies, each containing the swirling glow of endless memories. The siding looked like driftwood remnants after a bonfire, and I could almost smell the smoky char of pine in the air. It's strange how the past can cling to you, sometimes feeling more vivid and tangible than the world right in front of you. Jesus, it feels like just yesterday. My hand trembled as I placed it over my heart, trying to calm my breathing. Perry, my brother, pulled me into a tight embrace. His strength was like an anchor grounding me. The house hasn't changed much, but we have, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Between the two of us, Perry was as solid and stoic as a mountain range. It was a good thing too, because I was like the wind, flighty and unpredictable. Over the years, Perry had learned to weather even my fiercest storms. As his older sister, by a mere 4 minutes, I always wished I could have been his protector rather than the other way around. Yet, the demon burning inside me wore a crooked grin, knowing Perry would never leave me, especially now that I was sober. I hadn't touched a drink in precisely 730 days, but the fear that I might relapse lingered between us unspoken. After losing our parents in the fire, my mother didn't extinguish her 2 a.m. cigarette properly, and well, the rest is history. Perry and I only had each other. But let's call a spade a spade. We were as messed up and codependent as they come. Who chooses to visit the root of their addiction on the anniversary of their sobriety? As Perry gently pushed the house's dilapidated front door open, it creaked on its rusted hinges, barely holding on. After you, Perry gestured, squinting in the sunlight. Ever the gentleman, even in this dreary place. As he held the door, the shallow scar on his right cheek taunted me like a schoolyard bully. It always pulled me in. Some days I was sure I'd dive right in and drown. On other days, I wished to God or the devil to let me finally drown. That mark became permanently etched on Perry's face the day I quit drinking, exactly 730 days ago. That was when Perry screamed bloody murder at me from the passenger seat. "Jackie, stop the fucking car." But my blood was too poisoned with Bacardi Limon to listen. All I remember was my vehicle wrapped around a tree. I could have died that day, but what haunts me is that I almost killed Perry. A lot can happen in 730 days, but I assure you, forgiving yourself isn't one of them. "Well, you coming in?" Perry asked, still holding the door open. I shook it off and exchanged a knowing glance with my brother. Though fraternal, I swear we had twin telepathy. I exhaled and stepped inside. "Watch your step," I warned, tension in my brow. I imagined the rickety floorboards collapsing beneath us, sending us crashing into what was once our dad's man cave. That's where he was passed out on the night of the fire. "Kids, stay here. Do not move," our mother had instructed after getting us safely out of the house. I remember the black soot on her face and the spiderweb veins in her eyes as she shook us firmly by the arms. "I'm getting your father." Perry and I clung to each other, shaking. The heat from the inferno felt like standing in a volcano. We never saw our parents again. 2 decades later, there we were, Perry and I, traversing the wreckage of our old home. It was midday, yet the house seemed to echo a pale blue midnight. My shoulders were hunched, as though we were in a haunted house attraction. I coughed into my arm, the air thick with dust. As I cleared my throat, Perry called out from behind me. "Jax, look at this. The fireplace," he said, awe filling his voice. "Unbelievable. It's still here," I whispered, a lump forming in my throat. It was as though a fairy godmother had breezed through, bringing the decaying living room to life with a magical paintbrush. Like in Titanic, when they showed the sunken ship transformed into its former glory as it sailed the Atlantic. We made our way to the fireplace and sat cross-legged on the floor. This was our favorite spot, remember? I avoided his gaze, overwhelmed by memories. "Yeah," Perry murmured, his eyes soft with nostalgia. For a moment, the taste of crispy, fire-roasted marshmallows overcame the mildew stench. "Remember our Esmeralda nights?" I asked. "Duh. What about our fireplace movie nights?" Perry continued, mimicking my childhood voice. "But Mom, I want to watch Beauty and the Beast." "Perry always picks the movie." I punched him in the arm. First, I never sounded like that. Second, so what? I knew what I wanted. Perry's mouth curled into a smile. He had this sincere sparkle as if a storm cloud of confetti followed him wherever he went. You really did, kiddo. My chest felt heavy. How could Perry love me after everything I'd done? The relationships I'd ruined, the jobs I'd lost? The relationships of his I'd wrecked? How could he still choose me when I had so often chosen a bottle of Jack Daniels over him? How could Perry still love me after I almost killed him? Perry's gaze widened. Hey, remember the hot drinks Mom used to make? He paused, searching for the term. Apple something? Apple esse. I snapped my fingers. Apple schnapple. Yes. Looking back, it was basically hot apple cider, but it was so good. And it truly was. Our laughter echoed through the abandoned asylum we once called home. Perry leaned back, supporting himself with his hands. I loved our fireplace hangs, especially our movie nights. But nothing beats the movies up in the projector room. I tilted my head. We never had a projector room. Perry playfully waved me off. No, Perry, I would remember a projector room. Our movie nights were our favorite. You just said it. The house fell silent as Perry leaned in. Memories are tricky, aren't they? The subtle shift in his tone made my skin crawl. Perry was always wistful, but this felt different, almost clinical. We often remember things in ways that are easier to digest. I was fidgety. Geez, Perry, you sound like Dr. Lasko. He seemed to enjoy my little joke. Dr. Lasko had been my therapist since the accident. He wouldn't have approved of this self-imposed exposure therapy of visiting the house. Perry snapped out of his therapist moment and returned to his sparkly, confetti-filled self. As he scanned the mantel above the fireplace, a sickening uneasiness swept over me. Imagine you had actually killed him. Man, I can still picture all our family photos up there. Perry's childlike wonder destroyed me. My face flushed as tears welled up. How pathetic and infuriating that, after everything I'd done, I still saw myself as the victim. Hey! He took my hand. Oh, Perry. I threw myself into him. I'm so sorry. My brother held me with his usual care, which I didn't deserve. Jax, it's okay. I'm still here. We're both still here. As I rested my chin on my brother's shoulder, I gazed at the remains of the house. Something felt off, beyond the general unsettling vibe. I furrowed my brow. Wasn't the kitchen doorway on the other side of the living room? I felt Perry shrug. I don't think so. I stared at the misplaced doorway, trying to pull a memory toward me. That's when I saw them in the kitchen. The translucent figures of Mom and Dad. Mom was preparing our apple schnapples, pacing while Dad sat motionless at the table, face down on its mahogany surface. His glass of apple schnapple was empty, as was the bottle of Jim Beam beside it. Mom floated into the living room, warm drinks in hand and a cigarette in her mouth. Kids, your father's not feeling well. Let's have our apple schnapples in here. Oh my God, the bruise on her face. Perry jarred me back to reality with the gut punch of his next words. You're remembering the truth about Mom and Dad, aren't you? I pulled away from him. How did you? My brother looked down, tracing the floor with his finger. We always put them on a pedestal after they died. A shiver ran down my spine. What are you talking about?